Welcome to episode 3 of the Keepin It Loose Podcast. I am your host, Dalton D. Skach, here with my co-host, Cole C. Skach Wolfpack. We are without, unfortunately, our third co-host, Oliver Paka Omamba Shawa this evening, but he will be with us in episode 4. In today's discussion, we'll be going over 2 topics. The first topic should there be a salary cap in college football? I'll dive in, share some context here in a moment. And the second one is, should colleges be able to sell equity stakes to private equity firms? So we'll kick off with the first topic. Should there be a salary cap in college football? This is covering both coach and player compensation, similar to the NFL model. For some context, the current spending in college football, we're seeing elite programs spend around $100 million annually on football. We're talking coaching staff, player compensation, and operations. Whereas you might see a gap where with colleges like Ohio State University and Alabama spending $100 million, everything annually, as I mentioned, you see mid-tier programs that are maybe spending $50 million or less. There are no limits at all in college football as it relates to coach salaries, NIL payments, and recruiting budgets. They're completely unrestricted. And so today we're talking about our thoughts on that. For pro cap, we're seeing maybe it creates competitive balance. It prevents financial disasters like a $54 million buyout for LSU's coach, and also protecting smaller programs. For the case of anti-cap, we're saying maybe free market should decide value. Enforcement is impossible, and this might limit player earnings. D-Skach, where do you fall on this topic?
Yeah, this is just a dicey topic. D-Skach, this is a dicey topic. Yes, I believe there should be a salary cap in college football. I think before we kind of get into the pros and cons of yes versus no salary cap, I just think it's gotten completely out of hand. I think the product of college football has gone down because of this. This is all, in my opinion, there's no facts behind this. I don't enjoy watching college football as much as I once did. Just for some reason, it feels like, you watch a team get down 14 points on the road and, they're not fighting as hard to come back. They're playing to protect themselves from injury. And it just seems like the product of college football, because of this, has gotten very out of hand. I think it's gotten even more lopsided than it was as well, similar to the points that you were saying before, 100 million versus 50 million, right? I mean, think about why the Dodgers just won back-to-back World Series, and think about why the Pittsburgh Pirates will probably never be in the World Series, right? And if they do, it's going to be because of destiny and a lot of other outside parameters. But that was because the MLB got so out of control at the inception of things like an NIL, right? And they don't have collective bargaining agreements. I mean, these players aren't even employees right now, right? I mean, they're making millions and millions of dollars, and they're still protected under like antitrust laws, right? Which I'll kind of go into maybe some of the more pros and cons of where I think there's hurdles on it. But just long story short, I think it's gotten out of hand.
You think the product's gotten worse because there is less competition?
I think there's less competition. I think players are obviously incentivized, just like I'm incentivized, you're incentivized. I mean, try to do the best thing possible for your teammates, but I'm going to be incentivized by making me and my family at the end of the day as much money as possible, especially when the NFL is not guaranteed, right? I mean, there's so many players every single year that go undrafted or even get drafted in the 5th round or later, and they never see a football field, right? So I think you've changed the psyche of a lot of these college football players, and I'm not seeing the product out there. I'm not enjoying it, and that's my personal opinion. That has nothing to do with, I think, some of the facts that go behind it. Do you think the college football product has gotten better or worse since the NIL came in?
I completely agree. I think the product has gotten worse, and I don't think it's getting better. And I think that if you don't put a cap on it, it's only going to get worse as well. I think you're going to have completely different leagues. I mean, you already have different conferences, which is basically what it's turned into. It's basically like you're more familiar with soccer, internationally, but just maybe the Premier League versus one of these other smaller leagues. And one of these small leagues having no chance to go to the Premier League or win a championship. And so I think it's very similar in that aspect. And what I would also kind of ask you is, if there were a salary cap, we've already mentioned, we both think that it would improve the quality of the sport and the entertainment. Do you
Mhm.
think, what do you think, how would this impact? Do you think it'd be a good thing for the NFL and for the players of college football if this happened?
The salary cap in general is what you're saying, if that was to
Yeah,
begin. I think, there's going to be backlash no matter what with change and regulation. I'm sitting here today saying that this needs to be more regulated. And again, the very
the
first point I
salary cap,
made was this has gotten out of hand. Yeah. And so with the salary cap, I think it kind of puts into like play a little bit more of a structure, a business structure, because right now it's just the wild, wild west.
right,
I mean,
right,
and these guys, there's some people on a team that are making $6, $7 million, and the guy right next to them, is paying for college. Like,
mhm, right.
and and that kid that's making $7
Good point.
million also has a full ride scholarship. So the imbalance is internal on the teams. It's across the entire college football league. And I think the most important thing is college football was the last sport college sports in general were the last sports in the entire world where it was about the purity of the sport. And that was the identity of college football was, these kids are going to go out there. They're 18, 19 years old. They're going to do everything they can every single day to make it big time. Right. I think that's where you lost your identity now in college football and a lot of college sports. But I think primarily college football has lost its identity because they've essentially they're trying to go to, I mean, you can't go to a Premier League model.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, in my perspective, I think that setting a salary cap, which I am in favor of, I think it would
Mhm.
improve. I think it'd be the best. I think it'd be great for the NFL. I think it'd be great for college football. I think it'd be great for the college football players. And the main reason for the NFL is that we're now seeing players in college that are not going into the NFL, which is at the end of the day, the golden ticket, the
Mhm.
end all be all, go to the NFL, win a Super Bowl. And so now we're seeing players that are wait longer to go into the NFL, maybe giving up opportunities, later on for opportunities at that moment. And so I think it'd be good for the NFL. As we've already mentioned, I think it'd be good for college because we're now seeing these coach contracts that are just getting absurd. And you're getting billionaires that are coming in that are just paying these college coaches more money than they're paying all of the players. And they're paying these coaches that money to not even coach. So it's
Mhm.
gone out of hand, especially when you're looking at the schools and universities of what they were created for in the first place, which is education.
Yeah.
So I think it can even end up one of those ways where you're just going like, hey, we're losing so much money on maybe our athletic director or our athletic program
Yeah.
now because we made all these bad decisions that now we can't afford our business school anymore because we have to go pay a coach.
Yeah.
And then the last piece is just the players. I mean, the players at the end of the day, they're 18 years old. I can't even imagine making millions of dollars at 18 years old. And also like people coming from, lower income backgrounds and how that is going to affect them. Right now, I think we've seen it under control for the most part. I think at the end of the day, I think there's like it's like ruin the natural progression of go from high school, go to college, get a free degree, then go to the NFL, make a lot of money, win a Super Bowl, call it a day. But I also think for the universities aspect as well, I think it'd be good for, I mean, all universities if they put a cap on it, because now let's say they are making $100 million per year with their football program, and then let's say that
Mhm.
they're spending $100 million per year with their college football program just to stay relevant. Well, I think if you bring it down to $50 million and they're still able to make another $50 million on top of that now in revenue, that can go towards investing in their other sports programs or investing in their school, right? So it
Yeah.
will
Mhm.
improve quality of life for the students.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it goes back to the identity thing, right? Like, why are we going to college in the first place, right? It was for an education. It's not these colleges are institutions and they're nonprofit centers,
Mhm.
right? And you go from a nonprofit center to all that the only thing that they care about is making money at the end of the day for the school. Why would they not go and shut down? Let's say the business schools not as profitable to us. It's not driving any revenue. We don't have a good professors. Do we want to try to pick that up, or do we want to just completely put it into somewhere else? And so I think that's where I like your point a lot. It's just loss of identity and what drives a school's making decisions.
And I guess on this topic for the next questions that we would get into is what gets capped, right? How do we cap this? Is it just coaches? Is it players too? Is it total football spending? I mentioned earlier, right? Recruiting budgets and the things of that nature. So, in your perspective, what gets capped? What type of capped would you want to see, or would be ideal, and who would enforce this cap?
Yeah, I mean that's the $1,000,000 question, D Skach. That's a really hard question. And I think because of how messed up the rollout of this was, you can't jump from, okay, absolutely no regulation whatsoever, and it's the wild, wild west, to an NFL like system, right? Where the
Right.
NFL, I think, does it better than any other sports, whatever company, corporation, NBA, MLB. They make it the most even. Just like any day,
Yep.
the Carolina Panthers can go and beat the Green Bay Packers on the road as 14-point underdogs,
Yep.
right? And you never see an NFL spread get above 12, 13 points, right? And so
Yep.
the reason why I say those things is because we can't go from absolutely no regulation to just NFL type regulation where it is genuinely pretty much an even playing field in the NFL. Like across the board, like it's pretty much an even playing field. It's up to you to manage this team effectively and do it, like costly on some seasons, just like the Colts just traded for Sauce Gardner today,
I
right?
heard.
Couple big draft picks there. We're gonna have huge cap hits in 3 to 4 years, right? Like that is an in-depth, intelligent move, or it's gonna be the most unintelligent move we've ever made. But I say that with all saying, go back to answering your question. I think we have to go to a little bit more of an MLB structure first to try to bring this back home a little bit. I think that, we're going to have salary caps. Let's call it, if you're saying 50 million and 100 million, right? 50 million for the lower tiered schools, 100 million for the schools like Bama and Georgia and all those schools. Let's say we made it a $75 million cap. Well, that's great and everything like that. There's going to be what Georgia and Alabama are going to come back with, and they're going to be like, we drive this brand. We've driven the revenue of this college football brand for years and years and years. We deserve to be able to go over that cap. And so I think that's where it goes into the MLB structure of kind of that luxury tax. I don't know if you're
Mm,
familiar
mm,
with the luxury tax at all in the MLB.
not too familiar.
Okay, so essentially let's use the 75 million for example, and let's say Alabama, they spend 125 million. They're 50 million over their salary cap. Well, they have to pay a 40, typically I think in the MLB it might be a 40 to 50% luxury tax
Yeah.
on whatever they're over that goes into a pool for
Mhm.
the budgeted schools essentially, or the ones that aren't even hitting their salary caps, they can't.
Mhm.
So I think that's my bridge. I'd love to hear. I mean, I
Yeah.
know this is something that
Let me
you're
share
really
my
good at.
perspective. Yeah, I hear that. That's interesting on the luxury tax front. My concern with it is that these we're seeing these schools already spend and burn so much money on everything else that I feel like they would be willing to burn more for that luxury tax. As you were talking and saying that, I too think that the NFL structure, the cap, is the best, but I also think it can be a little unfair for the reason that you just mentioned, which actually brings me to compensation. So in the NFL, right, they all have the same salary cap, and every year, no matter if you're the last in the league, if you're the New York Jets or you're the Buffalo Bills or Kansas City Chiefs, they split the money from the NFL from all their rights and
Mhm.
media coverage and sponsorships 32 ways, right? They said it right down essentially the middle, right? So
Phenomenal.
each exactly, right? So that is something that I actually would not agree with in college football because you're right. You're right that Alabama and Ohio State are driving this brand. They should be compensated accordingly. And here's what I would think. I think it goes into two different pieces of this. The first is going to be the conferences. The conferences can be, I think, have their own salary caps. I think they should be even within some reasonable spread of each other. Like, let's
Mhm.
say, just for example, Alabama, Ohio State, FSU, they're at the 50 million. But then you go down to the Big Ten, maybe the ACC, maybe these other ones, it goes down by maybe 10 million or 5 million or whatever it might be, right? So kind of keeps it still competitive in a way, right? And in that manner. And maybe you go down to the lower ones, maybe it's like 30, or maybe it's even just closer to everything else. So I think the
Mhm.
conferences, it could do something like that. But here's another thing. Here's another thing
Okay.
is that let's say that they were to essentially create one big league, maybe with not all the different conferences in it. Maybe that's like divisions like the NFL and things like that. Maybe everybody has the same salary cap. as the NFL does. Everybody has the same salary cap, but
Yeah.
they're paid out based on how well they perform. Freaking Colorado, University of Colorado, or let's just call it, it's called Colorado State University,
Mm-hmm.
has the opportunity and chance to invest $75 million this year, the same as Ohio State does, right? They both have the
Mm-hmm.
same cap. They go, hey, I'm going to spend $75 million, spending $75 million. I'll see you at the end, and we're going to be compensated by how well we do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that one could be really intriguing, really interesting. And then on a side note, I think that is really for coaches' salaries. I think that is for player salaries. I think that is for recruiting. What I
Mm-hmm.
think colleges can also do to differentiate themselves now will be what the NFL does, and that is build new stadiums, right? Build bigger, newer stadiums, better facilities. And maybe you get that benefit of these players now that are making millions of dollars. They're going to say, hey, I can go play at, I can go play at this university in California and pay 13% state tax, or I can go play at the University of Nevada, Reno and pay 0% state tax, for
Yeah.
example, right? And USC's budget and UNR's budget is going to be the same, $75 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they might go, USC might have the history and traditions and better stadium, but I'm going to go for that state tax, right? And maybe UNR is going to spend money and raise money to be able to build a bigger stadium. So I would love to see it like that. I think it then offers smaller schools like UNR, like Colorado State, like these smaller schools to go out and say, hey, now that we can be comfortable that we're all on the same playing field, now
Yeah.
we're all going to go out and we're going to invest the same amount, because if we do better with the money that we have than these other schools, we're going to make more money, right? And then also attract better attendance for our schools if they want to go to a winning school.
Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying, and I think it's logical in every sense of that's how it should have probably been set up in the first place when they rolled this thing out,
They were not
right?
loose.
They're not very loose at all. I mean, well, actually, no, they were too
They were
loose.
too loose.
They were
They were
way
too
too
loose.
loose. I mean, I don't know what we were thinking that we're just going to have a completely with 18, 19-year-olds that have no like
They went from full regulation to no regulation.
barely any financial literacy
Right.
whatsoever, right? I mean, that's
Well,
the
to be
other.
fair, they've done so far. They've been, they haven't gone too crazy.
I know, and I agree, and it hasn't gotten too crazy. And even I know there are requirements for financial literacy type things that are involved with this, but still, the way that it was rolled out, I felt like it was done a bit egregiously. Now, going back to your point, what do you think Alabama or Georgia is going to say, or do you care what they say? Because you're right now saying I am the
Well,
commissioner of college football, and this
right.
is what we're going forward with right now. So what is Alabama and Georgia going to say when you're like, hey, you and Nevada, Reno, who's not won a football game basically this year, maybe one, they haven't really won a football game in the last 5 years. What are like, and you're going to give them the same exact budget and just hope that.
Well, it's not that the NCAA is giving them this money. UNR still has to make that decision to go invest that money. They still need to go make that decision that they're going to invest this money in order to compete. If they don't want to spend that money to compete, and they don't want to go win a lot of games and get more revenue through winning games and being ranked, that is also a decision, right? It's not saying, hey, everybody, here's 75 million. I think there will be schools that are going to say, hey, we're going to try to go compete with Alabama with 50 million or 30 million. But at least we know that we're not going to spend 30 million while Ohio State's spending $250 million, right? And we have no chance, because then it's just, then why even spend 30 million? I spend 5 million or 2 million, because why
Yeah.
even bother? Why even bother? So I think it just gives it similar with the NFL, right? They have caps, but doesn't mean that every team every year hits that cap.
Correct. Yep. I completely understand that. Yeah, it's interesting. I just think the biggest problem here is just like if I was the head coach or the athletic director at Alabama or Georgia or Florida, I'd be like, look, like we've schmoozed a lot of people to get to this point. We've done a lot of things. We've won a lot of games. We've won a lot of championships. We've driven so much revenue. Now you're going to bring me down to this playing field. It really is like the difference between UNR and Alabama is the difference between Premier League football and the MLS, right? It's not even
Right.
close. You get a Premier League team that plays an MLS team, they're going to get dominated.
Well, again, like, as what I'm saying is that these other schools, it doesn't mean that that $75 million for everybody relates into now Alabama is nothing. Alabama still has a history. They still have the current players. They still have the coaching staff. They still have all of these things. Um, that make them great. And so
Mhm.
it would cost UNR. I mean, like UNR would have to go out and find coaches, find the money first, right? Then find the players and the recruiting. They might even want to build another stadium or renovate another stadium and like change the image in order to go do so. So it would be a large endeavor, but it would also be telling to Alabama and FSU and these colleges, and they're going to say, hey, this is a way for you. Again, the benefit for these colleges, there's going to be a lot of benefit for these colleges. The benefit is you're not spending $54 million on paying somebody not to coach your team like LSU is, right? They're going,
Yeah.
hey, we're going to cap it so that you guys don't have to run into this nonsense anymore. And you don't have to pay an 18-year-old $10 million next year to come over, right? And we're going to
Yeah.
be doing this. And we're going to say, hey, you can continue to build your stadiums and all this stuff. We're going to take care of you. It's going to be a better sport. It'll be better for everybody at the end of the day if we can compete all on the same level. But I think we're in
Yeah.
agreement here, C. Scotch.
We are.
What do you think about going to topic number 2?
I like that. Yeah. I mean, that's not going to be the last time we're discussing that topic. I think we can go for easily an hour to an hour and a half on that topic. But I think for now, we're both relatively agree with each other. I'm more of a hybrid salary cap role, I would say, similar to the MLB. You're saying let's mimic this NFL and the way that they do it to a degree. And
Yep.
I that's what I would want. I just think it's more reasonable to get to the luxury tax with a little bit less of disruptions.
I
Just to
understand.
summarize
Yeah.
that there.
Right.
But I would
Right.
love
Right.
love to move to topic 2. This one I don't know if me and you are going to be in as much agreement on here.
Well, let's do the context first, and then
Yeah,
for this one, I can kick things off. What do you think?
I like it. Let's
All
hear it.
right. Topic number 2. Should colleges be able to sell equity stakes to private equity firms? So what this means is that a school like Florida State could hypothetically sell 20% of its athletic department to a PE firm for $500 million.
Mhm,
And FSU can use that money to maybe get into a new conference or maybe build some new buildings or a stadium or maybe even put it towards education. What
mhm,
a, thought. Why not do that, right? It could be done through maybe a revenue share model, a full equity stake. There could be maybe even conference level deals and things of that nature. The pro private equity argument would be schools need capital for realignment in facilities.
mhm.
Professional management could reduce waste, and it's inevitable. Anyways, I don't know if it's inevitable. The anti private equity case would be universities aren't businesses, loss of institutional control to private equity firms, and maybe misaligned incentives with private equity firms wanting quick returns, and universities exist in perpetuity, right?
Mhm.
Here's my take on it. So on this topic, I actually lean towards no. I lean towards no in terms of
Stop it.
colleges selling
Stop
true
it.
equity stakes. I say no to the equity
Oh,
stake.
that is loose right there, D Sketch. I did not see that come in any way, shape, or form.
No deal, C Scotch, no deal. But instead of equity, I think equity becomes a little bit too complicado, as they might say in other places of the world. But instead, how I see it as a maybe creative financing opportunity rather than maybe doing it with equity. I actually see it as maybe there are ways for private equity firms or companies to provide financing to these schools in exchange for maybe whether it be branding on stadiums, branding on apparel, naming rights, sponsorship perks, maybe getting some, a box, for a handful of years. And maybe rather than saying, hey, we're gonna give you $100 million or $500 million to do all this, maybe we'll give you financing at, this lower rate of maybe 3%,
6.5, 5%. I mean,
something
yeah,
low,
I
something
hear
low
you.
and
I hear you.
competitive.
I hear you.
And also, it might even be a way for these private equity firms to say, hey, we're going to go do this for you. We're going to give you such great terms on this program, but we're also going to want to help maybe develop some buildings, maybe help, develop some, opportunities for the business school and things of that nature, maybe getting first dibs and things like that. So when it comes to equity, it just, it just doesn't feel right. The creative financing seems a little bit more dialed in, and I could see that working. But with private equity, I just don't see how universities would do it, what they would use it for, how they would sell it, things of that nature. What do you think on that?
I mean, honestly, Skach, I absolutely love it. I didn't have, I would say, a solution today to my absolutely not selling equity stakes to private equity firms in college football. I didn't have a solution. My solution was just absolutely not. I think there's a lot of other ways that colleges can continue to find money through a lot of different revenue streams that they're already very good at doing. And so the reason why I really like, honestly, the financing portion, because that's good for both sides, and that
Right.
doesn't change control. What it does is it diversifies private equity while also giving some funding when needed to um the universities, where I think that you're that maybe, and I don't know if you're missing this at all. Private equity firms, I mean, how liquid are they, Skach? Like, how much cash do they have laying around where they want to just get rid of, 100, $200 million of cash and finance that at a way lower rate than if they put it into a fixed income product and made 5.5% for the next, 6, 7 years. Right? Like, why wouldn't colleges just do this with other institutions like banks,
Right.
right? That are liquid and have that, because what I see in the industry with private equity firms is they're not very liquid firms. And
Right.
I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, they need to call capital and things of that nature. It's got to be approved. But here's how I see it. Here's how I see it. Because what's a reason why and a billionaire might go buy a NFL team or an NBA team? And the reason a lot of the times is to have that ownership and that status of owning. It's like how they say it in the show Billions. It's how you knight people in this country when you ended up buying an NFL team. There's only
Mm-hmm.
32 NFL teams. There's lots of
Yeah.
college football teams, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm not even saying it might be even private equity. It could say this could be other firms. Like this could be like high powered tech firms. You can see Anduril. Anduril is one of the main sponsors over for
Yeah.
Ohio State, right? But maybe it's one of those things where you're renaming buildings. You're giving in the same level of status that you would to maybe an owner without maybe even owning it.
So you're
And
just
it's
saying
maybe a higher
liquid
level.
companies, and sorry for interrupting, you're just saying liquid companies in general, liquid corporations that have, let's say, a lot of cash on the books, or they know how to get capital quickly and they're willing to do so to get, let's say, like you said, a name on a building put up at the university and all these other different advantages that come with that. Is that kind of more what you're saying? And maybe even, yes, maybe private equity firms, but I don't know if this would be a private equity play because of the absolutely small rate of return that they're going to be getting on that financing money with
Right,
no equity. That's
right,
and to my point of why
right.
I was like, absolutely not, shut this topic down, is because how are you ever gonna? Maybe you can say, oh, you'll get 15 to 20% of our revenue for the next 20 years, no equity. You don't think that the private equity firms? That's why it's called private equity, right? They're not gonna agree to that. They're gonna want to change things operationally. They're gonna want to have control of the operational structure of new entity, right? And now you're going from a nonprofit to a for-profit, essentially,
Hmm.
that is backed by a company. And no shade against private equity firms. I think there's a lot of good things that they do in the world, but I think there is one underlying thing that everybody knows about private equity firms, and it's about the bottom line. And
Right.
so teachers, maybe they're going to have less teachers. Maybe they're not going to put as much into the business school because it's not like, right,
Well, I'm
because
not
they're
saying selling
charging.
off the parts of the university. I don't think you can even do that. I think maybe even might be, again, I think we're talking about the same thing here, selling future revenues. I think a private equity firm would be interested in selling future revenues of a specific program. If Ohio State were to say, hey, here's how much money we make right now through all these deals, and we're going to give you 15% of that in the future, whether it goes up or whether it goes down, whether it goes side to side, whatever it might be. Maybe it's part of profit, but then also, it'd have to be a bet by the private equity firm saying, hey, we're only going to make our money back through future cash flows, not to do a little, present value, and also understand that a little bit more. But they would want some control over how those decisions are made, which, let's be honest, let's be honest, could be actually better for the schools and their programs to have people that are focused on the money rather than just the schools going, hey, we're going to hire somebody.
I
And if he
hear you
doesn't,
on that.
now we're going to go to one of the alumni and boosters and go, hey, we messed up. Can we have $50 million more? The private equity person is going to go, no, I'm going to get you a better contract than that one.
You're absolutely right. And I think that's a totally different topic of a private equity firm is probably going to bring in operational efficiencies, right? They'll probably upgrade technology. They're going to upgrade other things to make it run more efficient than it is today while they cut the back end though, right? So there's going to be that trade-off either way of private equity is going to bring an innovation to a program to make it a lean, mean machine like they always do, like they're pros and experts at. But then now you've lost control. And now you're starting to lose a little bit of that human element, right? And so even back to our first topic here of like, talk about losing your identity, right? I mean, you start selling college football programs to private equity firms, and I think you kind of lose your identity even more. So
hear me out now. I'm kind of changing my thoughts on this topic. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you. What do you mean? I'm changing your thoughts for the worse right now?
Hey, it depends on how you're thinking about this from whatever perspective. Here's another thought that a school could go for and a private equity firm could go for. This would only happen if there were a salary cap, I must mention.
Okay.
If there were a salary cap, I could see a private equity firm going to the University of North Carolina just because they've been in the news recently. And they're going to go, okay, you're spending this much money on $20 million. We're going to come in. We're going to come in and we're going to give you the $75 million you need. And we're also going to spend another $75 million to help you build like a new stadium or some new recruiting or some new things for the school, maybe even build a park or a library or things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And they're going to say, in exchange for giving this, right, we're not going to do it via, I guess, maybe do it via a loan, but it's just one of those things where they're going to say, okay, we have confidence that if we make this investment into this university, that we will increase their cash flows through stadium deals, media rights. The deal I mentioned at the very end, if a school does better, they get paid more from the NCAA at the very end of the year, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you did.
And they're going to say, hey, if we're able to do this, but then also they're going to say, hey, if we're able to get you a top 12, top 20 finish, or even a visit to the playoffs, we want a higher pref. We want a higher pref on those returns from the cash flows. So they might say, hey, we're making this a big investment, but then if this happens, rather than getting 15% of the cash flows that year, we want 50% of the cash flows. And they're already going to the sports program anyways, right? Yeah. But in that instance, you're essentially, what you're not doing is you're not selling the equity because maybe actually this piece could be sold out of this kind of business deal, this business transaction. But in that scenario, if there's a salary cap, I could see a UNC and going, hey, there's only one way for us to compete. We don't have the money to even go get the 75 mil. We're going to go get a private equity firm. We're going to give them a library. They're going to spend the money. They're going to make us great. And if they make us really great, then they're going to get paid more. If they don't, they're going to get paid less. They're going to get paid less of something that we're already getting. So the universities really put nothing in.
So, and I think that's a fair point. I think it's a very sophisticated, solution, right? And it does go directly into the salary cap. I think that was well said. Too, that where I again start kind of having hiccups is the nonprofit versus essentially the for-profit and what changes there, because you get all this federal funding, right? And you have these tax exemptions, right? Like that starts to concern me a little bit now that all of a sudden you're bringing this for-profit center under something that's tax exempt and that's receiving federal funding as is today.
I don't know. I think that this entity might be different. I think this entity might be a side entity that is maybe not part of the.
But would that affect? So it'd just be a completely separate entity from the university in general. You're now completely taking college sports outside to a completely different entity. I mean, that's what you're saying. You're pulling them out of the nonprofit entity. Because again, this is where I just think from like this standpoint, it gets really dicey because you have the federal government that loves and the universities that are institutionalized that all of a sudden they're going to give up control to private equity, Skach. Like,
I love this topic, and I almost feel like in episode 4, episode 5, we should revisit the topic because I
Mhm.
think there's some questions about it that we don't know, and that might take a little bit too long for us to look up. Because I
Yeah.
think I would love to learn more about how universities are structured
Mhm.
with their sports program specifically, but also with everything else, and
Yeah.
with tax exemptions and that nature, and see if there's any case studies of of schools doing something of this nature and how it worked out for them.
Mhm.
Because if I better understand that, which I'm sure these lawyers do, and these private equity firms definitely do, and these colleges are definitely understanding and looking into as well as things have gotten so out of hand, that would be
Mhm.
interesting discussion to see how one might be tailored if it's not already being tailored right now. I know that the SEC right now just got a, I think, offer for $2 billion to get their media rights in the SEC over the next, was it SEC or ACC over the next 20 years, getting a
Yeah.
certain portion of that.
Don't
So I
remember
think
which
it could
one.
be even a similar structure to that.
Well, because you also have, and this is again a point that we should think about too, is private schools versus public schools, right? Private universities versus public universities. Like what's the difference in those structures, right? I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. This is personally something that I don't. This is outside the sports realm, which I don't like getting into that as much. But if we're gonna talk about the sports realm, we have to know about how those places are structured, right?
Right. I
And the
think that it would
differences
have to be for
between
universities that are under the NCAA. I'm not sure that private liberal art schools that maybe have like a rugby team, but they don't have anything else, we would want to maybe focus on. But I think NCAA schools that are affected by NIL and these things and by private equity could be very interesting to us, most
yeah.
importantly to our audience.
Correct. Yeah. No, loose, loose. I guess to kind of at least wrap up my side of it overall, I am going to be a firm believer for probably a little while right now. And I'm excited to dive into this topic even more on one of our future episodes when we can get a little bit more granular on it. But I absolutely don't think there's any place for private equity firms in college football. I think giving up any operational control it's a big joke to do in any regard right now for college football programs. I think they've given up enough control to the players and the coaches, and honestly the coaches are the ones that are taking advantage of the most. And we do need to go back to that topic and later things with Brian Kelly and everything that's happening in the world today. I also the final point I wanted to make, Dalton, is like I don't think private equity firms are as liquid for something like this as you might think. And you're going to start getting into, hey, we'll give you $100 million of it in, cash right now. And then we're going to give you the other 50% in equity that's going to be worth all of this after our fourth equity rollover 12 years, 15 years down the line, right? Like,
Well, that is how private equity essentially works. They make the
mhm,
investment and then into the firms, and then they get it out at a later time, either through an exit or through other manners. And so, and what I would say about one thing that we can agree on before coming back to that, one thing we can agree on is
mhm,
that we are for a salary cap of some manner. And I
yep,
want to just use that as a preface before I get into this next point, because this salary cap would need to exist for the next piece to make sense. But basically, it is just saying that I think my perspective is that these private equity firms will make better decisions operationally with coaches, players, with recruiting, with facilities, with everything if their money is tied to it. I don't think these athletic directors, who they
mhm,
make $1.5 million to $2 million a year, regardless if they win or not. And all that happens if they don't win, they get fired and go to a different school for $500,000 or $1 million a year, right?
yeah,
I think that private equity, when you say that they're involved for hundreds of millions of dollars, and these principals, these successful entrepreneurs, a lot of them, right? When they have the control over these programs to make those decisions, I think it can make a school very competitive, very great, and open up more opportunities for them. That's how I see it. But
That's interesting. Honestly, that's a great closing remark. I think about private equity in a lot of more business-like senses. I haven't really thought about private equity in sports as much. I think the way that you just said that, it does make more sense because there is that tension that's now created with performance and the private equity's decision making, right? And
right,
how much money they're going to be making because of that, right? And
right,
it's not like you're sitting here And this is recurring revenue every single year, year over year, right? I mean, you blow it in your performance and you start acting like a UNR and you start losing money on that, right? Like that's a bad. So there's that tension almost that's immediately created. So that's what I want to leave it on my side. I think you brought up a great point of, because of the unique competitive, like performance-based style that is college football, is sports in general. I think there is that kind of like human element that private equity firms have to come in and they have to perform at a very high level. And it might not all just be about cutting cost on the bottom line. So I like that. I thought you brought up a good point. I'm excited to talk more about it.
That's why we have these discussions on the Keeping It Loose podcast, featuring my co-host Cole Skach and myself,
Yep.
Dalton Skach. Thank you all for watching. Keep it loose, and we'll see you in episode 4.
Loose.
Take
Loose.
care.